It was Thursday night, it's Friday morning, and I was coming back home from eating dinner. I got out of the metro near my house, which is about three
Thomas
blocks
has
away
been
from my
teaching
house,
English in Madrid for
and
4 years.
about
He's
maybe
Chinese
20 meters
American.
away when I saw a group of two young men approach me. They were walking up the street, and they immediately yelled something, Puto coronavirus in Spanish, which is like fucking coronavirus in English. I got upset by it because in the past few months before that, I had heard that maybe 10, 12 times and just never responded. So I decided to say something back. And I think they came up to me and pushed, punched me. I might have tried to defend myself a bit, but I can't really remember much because the next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital about 30 hours later.
That attack left Thomas with a skull fracture and a brain hemorrhage. It took him about a month to recover. It's one example of the racist abuse seen across the world since the coronavirus started in Wuhan, China. But anti-Asian racism existed in Spain well before COVID-19 arrived. My name is Rosalanda. I used to teach English in Madrid just like Thomas does now. And I'm still part of a Facebook group for the global community of English teachers that work in Spain's capital. I posted on the group asking if anyone was willing to share their experiences of xenophobia. This is just a handful of the dozens of messages I was sent.
What I noticed in Madrid is that I would often be harassed on the street. One man followed me saying, so close, ni hao guapa, to me.
I didn't understand him. And he shouted, "Go back to your own country, China," in Spanish.
I am not Chinese, but I get told ni hao on the streets quite frequently.
The girl's name was Alba, but the teacher throughout the class always called her La China.
I've also had kids pull the corners of their eyes at me without the reprimanding of other responsible adults who are present.
A common theme that came up was that people of East Asian descent from all over the world were often called chinos. According to Madrid's local government, Chinese nationals are the third largest migrant community in the city, but it wasn't always that way. Gladys Nieto teaches Chinese anthropology at the Autonomous University of Madrid. She's been researching Chinese migration to Spain since the 1990s, when this community was very small.
Mainly, migrants came from Zhejiang province in the south of China, from a small town called Xintian and Wenzhou.
At first, people in the Chinese migrant community mainly worked in the restaurant industry. But by the late 90s, there was so much competition in that sector that it was difficult for new businesses to survive, especially in big cities like Madrid. So many decided to open family-run shops instead.
It was called the Payuentien. It was, something like grocery stocks. In Spain, we call it todo a cien. It was everything that you may buy there is €1.
I asked her what she thought of the fact that these grocery stores are most commonly referred to as los chinos, or the Chinese.
It is called chinos as if there were a kind of stores, usually open at night with long hours. I don't see this kind of naming as to be xenophobic, because this naming, I think, doesn't have a connotation, of for me, it's a kind of connotation of doing a hard work.
Not everyone agrees. Paloma Chen is a journalist who's interviewed many young Spanish people from Chinese origins whose families run these businesses. For them, language matters.
When a person says Chino and you don't specify that it's a Chinese restaurant or it's a Chinese shop, well, you are just assuming that the fact that it's Chinese is much more important than the product that you are selling or the service that you are offering. It's not the same as say, oh, let's go to the Italiano, let's go to the Italian. Because in the case for the Chinese, it's like saying, okay, I'm going to a shop where the products that are sold are made in China and everything is managed by Chinese people. So that means that it's really messy, means that the quality of the products is bad. Maybe it's dirty. You are also, considering all these stereotypes, all these prejudice. I mean, maybe you don't have bad intentions. You are just used to say that. But prejudice and stereotypes are in your back. It's like a backpack that you are carrying. Language is very important. After all, language is shaping our mind. And at least I would hope that people that still use this word have to reconsider, have to think a little bit and see, even though if you still continue using it because you are very, very used to it and you are not around Chinese people, never, and you think you are not offending anyone, but I really want you to consider it.
Paloma is a member of an organisation called the Chinese Diaspora Network, a group of young Spanish Chinese people who are working to change the narrative in Spain.
Hi, can you hear me? Well, my name is Kwan Zhu, and I'm an illustrator. I draw illustrations and comics about cultural shocks between China and Spain. It's called Gazpacho Agridulce. Gazpacho agridulce in Spanish means sweet and sour tomato soup. So it was very typical Spanish dish with the sweet and sour, which is a very Chinese dish. I have an Asian family, but I was born here in Spain.
Kwan has published 2 books and regularly posts new cartoons on Instagram.
The most famous example are like my mom getting super angry because I was like 20 something. I was still single, not married. And she was like, no, well, you're becoming super old. You need to find a Chinese man and get married and have babies. And I was like, Mom, I'm a graphic designer. I'm working. I have a super fulfilled professional life. Why are you not happy for me? We are in an economic recession. The Spanish public in general had welcomed it very much. They had a lot of fun because my humor is very Spanish. And I mean, culturally talking, I do use a lot of Spanish slangs, and they feel closer to the Chinese population of the Spanish Chinese community. Most of the Chinese people Chinese descent and Chinese people that read me totally understand what I'm talking about because it's our daily life. My work is not just illustration. I also do talks, I give speeches, I have been in the radio, I have been in the newspaper. So it's just not a little bit of laugh.
Kwan says that young Spanish Chinese people haven't been represented in the media. So second-generation activists and artists like her have created their own spaces for self-expression. Here's Paloma again.
So we started to use social media to upload in Twitter, Facebook, Instagram our pictures saying, I am not a virus, both in support of the victims of Wuhan, of the disease, because after all, no one is guilty of this. And the narrative in the media was like, this is because you don't have enough clean conditions, health conditions. What the hell? Do we have to measure everything with the standards of Western civilization, with the standards of white civilization? I mean, the narrative was a lot like, this is your fault because you eat wild animals. Can we be more compassionate? A virus have no nationality. And yes, on the other hand, it was also support for the young Chinese Europeans that were also being attacked.
It's been more than 3 months since Thomas was beaten up on the streets of Madrid.
Speaking up about something like this to prevent similar situations from happening is important, because when you let seemingly lighthearted racist jokes slide, it can create an atmosphere in which people can internalize these racist beliefs and let them out in the violent acts. Something I've come to realize a lot recently is that with my upbringing as an Asian American, but something I've also read from many other East Asian people in the world, is that we learn from a young age to accept things and to be quiet about them rather than speaking up. And that's something that in today's age, people of my generation can't create a better society if we keep doing that. And although it's really hard to do, learning it has been pretty revolutionary for me.